So, welcome to the Global Discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. Today, I'm joined by Maria Humphreys. Maria, you're very welcome to the podcast. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey, a little bit about what you're into to our international audience today. Over to you, Maria.
Wow. Well, first of all, of course, I want to thank you so very much for sharing the mic with me today. It's so amazing. The people that I've been meeting out here on social media for years now. But I'm telling you what, Simon, we met on Twitter Spaces. That particular feature of Twitter is amazing. It has set ablaze the kind of work that I'm doing out here. The reason I'm out here, I started podcasting years ago. My show is called Strong Body, Strong Soul, and I started on YouTube. And then I figured out that it was easier to podcast because it didn't really matter what I was wearing or what my lighting was like, right? And my kids really encouraged me to get onto YouTube. And then I started learning more about podcasting. For years, people had told me that I should have a podcast, and I didn't even know what it was at all. They just liked my voice and the way I explain things. And so as I got more into social media creation, it just flowed for me. My brain just kind of works. It merges the two, the spiritual side of what I do and the techie side that people are kind of afraid of. I started my show originally because I wanted to share what I was doing in meditation workshops. And my intention was to help holistic healers and practitioners by interviewing them on my podcast, because oftentimes they're not as brave about getting in front of the camera. Well, podcasting is audio, but sharing their voices out there. So I really am very passionate about helping people amplify their messages and their energy. That's what I do. That's me.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Maria. And you've mentioned a couple of things there. And obviously, you're helping people, you're building a community. There's the meditation side of things, of course, and then there's I suppose that balance between, well, I'm using the tools to reach my audience, to talk to my community, to
Mhm.
share information, but then there's also that little techie side of Maria that you really like learning about it and exploring the
I
latest
do.
tools and technologies. So maybe tell us a little bit about your experience of, podcasting and your experience of social audio, because I know you're a big fan. You're very active on social audio.
I am. I don't want to get too woo-woo on you in this conversation, but I really feel like audio is part of our soul. It's our energetic connection to other people. And it's interesting because I interviewed Timothy Hughes a little bit ago here. A couple of times we've had conversations on our shows. We take turns going back and forth. But he's talking about social selling, he's talking about marketing, he's talking about this being the age where we actually move the physical into the technological, into the digital realm. And I call it the ethereal. It's taking our physical and connecting with other people. And I mean, we can talk a little bit about, I don't know a lot about AI, for instance, but it's that kind of idea where we're creating a voice, we're creating for the future. That's what it's about for podcasting in particular. For me, like you said, like I explained, it's about connecting with ourselves when we're speaking, which is interesting because I think in social media in general, a lot of people, their number one goal is to get more followers. Their number one goal is to get engagement and interaction. And while that's true, while I want that too, a lot of my content is very personal. So on the podcast, for instance, no matter how many subscribers and listens I have, I don't know who those people are. And that's okay. That's okay. The numbers keep going up, but I don't need to know their name. I don't need that feedback from them. Most people are looking for those messages back. I love those, don't get me wrong. And I'll go off on a tangent on comedy with those. But from a meditation spiritual standpoint, sometimes people just want to absorb the energy that I'm putting out there without the need to reply. It's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, that's very
So,
interesting. And you sort of touched on something that I want to come back to you on, which is this this audio. It's personal, I think was the term that you used earlier, if I
yes,
heard correctly. And there's something quite magical, and I've often talked about it on this show where, that's sort of going straight in, it's going straight into the ear. You're actually
absolutely.
talking directly with that person, that sort of one-on-one relationship where, like
Mhm,
tuning in a wireless or a radio set years ago, you're just listening to it. Somebody's just talking to you. They're telling you a story.
mhm.
Um, and with your community, you're finding that's growing on a continual basis. Now, do you put that down to the quality of the content, obviously, that you're putting out? Do you put it down to the type of content and the niche that you're in? Do you put it down to word of mouth? Because a lot of people, as you say, they chase the analytics, and I'm not a big fan of, vanity metrics and all the rest of it. But
Mhm.
for somebody that's seeing a steady growth in listenership, that's a really positive thing. Well, when I ask you, why do you think that's the case? Is it people recommending other people? Is it just constantly putting out good content? Or how do you think about that?
I would say that I am not very good about being consistent. In the last 2 years during COVID, I have to admit, it has squished my energy in the podcasting on my own show. So, while most of the time the idea is with podcasting, consistency, consistency, have your audience if they're waiting for a show every Monday, whatever the case may be. My show has been a little different. Pre-pandemic, I was more consistent and I grew a following. Again, I don't know quite who they are, except for the amazing listeners that do call into my show, because that is possible, but only if you're on the Anchor platform. And we can talk techie a little bit if you want in a minute. But it's very difficult to get audio messages to podcast creators. And there are so many different tools to do that. I know there are ways, but they keep changing and such. During the pandemic, though, my energy has taken a hit on my own show. Instead, I have been focusing on helping other people more. That is where the social audio, the Twitter spaces, the Clubhouse, the wisdom comes into play. Facebook, I have a Facebook podcasting group that has almost 7,000 people in it. And it's a variety of topics. They are not about spirituality. I don't want to just hang out with people that are about spirituality. I want to be friends with the guys that are talking fantasy football and talking about building a business, talking about NFTs. Whatever their topic is, the basic idea is that we're all passionate about our subject, and our audience can tell, particularly in audio. You can't fake it. I mean, yes, I could pick up a book, and sometimes I do on the Wisdom app. I do a show where sometimes I read poetry, and I am reading from a book. And then I'm reflecting on lines in the poem that may have affected me. And I'm encouraging the listeners to do their own journaling, to do whatever they need to do. They can send me messages, but it's once again, it's very personal. I don't know what part of that poem or the way I expressed it in that particular moment. I may read the same poem 2 months later, and it may come out differently because I'm at a different place in my life and the audience is in a different place. And that goes hand in hand with the idea of practice, of meditation, in practice of anything you're doing. I think repetition, each time you do it, you get a different gift from it. And so I've allowed my podcast to grow in different ways. Now, yes, my energy has taken a hit from COVID. And for a little bit of time, I'm going to tell you this. I haven't said this publicly, but I was feeling a little bit like a loser for podcasting because I wasn't producing very much. But then I would get messages from people. I'm not even kidding you, Simon, saying, Maria, your show has helped me get through the pandemic. Like, it's that thing, Simon, where you don't know where your voice is supposed to travel. You don't know what that kind word, how it's going to affect someone. And so, yeah, it's just kind of magical. I think podcasting, any kind of social media, a lot of times the most current content is getting the most attention. So it is kind of a leap to get new listeners to go back into the archives of my show. I have 1,000 episodes out there. It's ridiculous how much content I've created because sometimes I'm just reading an affirmation and reflecting on it, sharing a couple of listener call-ins. But that episode, that little 10 minutes even if I recorded it 5 years ago, maybe somebody now needs to hear it. Sometimes it's me that needs to hear it. Sometimes I can hear my own voice and go, wow. And it's amazing. I love audio so very much.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Maria. And you mentioned a number of channels there, whether it's the Wisdom app, the Twitter
Mm-hmm.
Spaces app. Obviously, you're a big fan and supporter and active contributor to Twitter Spaces, and Clubhouse, you mentioned, which was right there at the start of the pandemic
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
became almost a lifeline for a lot of people to connect
Absolutely.
around the world. But I want to maybe step back a little bit and ask you something else about your career, because I want to throw in the words paralegal and firewalking and Tony Robbins, and I want to know
You've been
how we
doing your
get.
homework.
I want to know how we get from there to here. So could you maybe fill in the gaps a little bit about that for me?
That's so funny. Well, I think that a lot of us, the older we get, the more experience we have behind us. But at the same time, I want to say I could meet a 20-year-old that is very spiritually mature, more on the same page than me, than I might meet a 75-year-old. Age is irrelevant. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I would say is, yes, I've accumulated a lot of different experiences in my life. I have not just read books and affirmations by people, but I've actually been in the room with some amazing people in my life. Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Tony Robbins. Yes, I have walked the fire. I'm a fire walker. And it's interesting because Tony actually studied with this community that I've been working with for a long time that's based in India. One of my favorite teachers, one of the people that has inspired me the most, is Alina Shalev. She was my mentor when I first started out on the meditation journey 15 years ago. He studied with the same people. So a lot of times it's really important that no matter how famous you are, right? Whether it's Oprah or Gabrielle Bernstein, whoever it may be, a lot of the ideas that they're expressing have been around for a while. Wim Hof, right? Tony Robbins, he takes an ice bath every morning. That's how he gets going in the day. On Clubhouse, there are a lot of cold shower rooms, right? That are kind of modeled on the Wim Hof method. But being in cold water is a great way to connect. My experience, I first got into meditation more seriously, like I said, about 15 years ago. And the one thing I've learned throughout it all is to take what resonates with you. Life is a buffet. So many different ways to express ourselves, so many different teachings. You can go through Barnes and Noble and see all of those spiritual and self-help books, and you could drive yourself crazy trying to consume it all. When sometimes you just need to slow down And so much as, yes, it's been a whirlwind. Um, I have met amazing people. I have gone to amazing workshop, Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, amazing people out here in the world. In person before COVID, and then during COVID has been a great experience of being able to be online with a lot of different people from all over the world. That technology, I think it connects us in such amazing ways. But my career experience went from college, being in the radio broadcasting promotions department of a big radio station in San Diego, 91X. And I used to drive the Bronco around and be giving shirts away at surf competitions and such. Then I got into the concert industry in Los Angeles. My office was on the second floor of the Pantages Theater, but the company that I worked for ran the Greek Theater. It's an outdoor concert venue. We also ran the Pacific Amphitheater, but the company was based in New York. They're a legit Broadway theater company. Niederlander is the name of it. And for many years, I was bouncing back and forth between Broadway musical theater and concerts. I worked in the administrative department, but I was in charge of the VIPs and getting them good tickets and such. So practically every night I would be at the Greek theater backstage because I wasn't working the shows. I was working the 9 to 5 and then going to the shows and sometimes taking care of, our bankers and such, getting them in there. But I went from concert industry and then I went into the legal field. And in litigation, my ability to communicate. Yes, I was a paralegal. I wasn't an attorney, but my job was to take the legalese and help make it make sense for the jury. The attorneys, the partners would bring me in to chambers with the judge to talk about our motions in limine, how we're going to shape our visuals for our evidence and such. My job was to be that in-between person. They would look at me, Maria, what do you think? Does this make sense? How should this look? And I loved doing that. And I remember one of the partners years ago, he said he really enjoyed working with me, not only for what I produced and created in my work, but in what questions I asked during the process. Something about the way I look at things, and that ability to look at things a little bit differently than most people is what I do when I'm talking about technology and spirituality. Like, not a lot of people mix those two ideas together, but to me, it makes sense. And I'm careful with how I talk about it, depending on what demographic I'm addressing in the moment, because I don't want to scare people away that are really techie if I start talking about chakra and Kundalini energy. And I don't want to pressure people who are in the more spiritual realm to be, you got to get a mic, get on this mic. I have to interview you. We have to talk about this. I don't want to pressure anybody. Everybody needs to do what they need to do and mix it up the way they need to. So,
So
yeah.
thanks, Maria, because what's running through that all the way is communication, listening, maybe looking at things a little bit different. There's also a little bit of sort of that in between, that sort of go between, almost that translator, particularly in the
Mm-hmm.
legal sphere.
Yeah.
And the thing I wanted to ask you about that is, obviously the world's been through a very strange few years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us were on lockdown, and it kind of shaped and changed the way we think, and that connection with who we are and what's important to us, I think changed, or is maybe still changing for a lot of people. What was important to people maybe pre-pandemic may not be the same in a post-pandemic world. Do you find that in the work that you're doing and the people that you're talking to, or do you think, look, it's just the same? The world's moving at a ferocious rate. We're just all trying to hang on for dear life here.
I think that this period of time that we have just gone through and are still going through, we are all learning that the technology, social media in general, is not the enemy. I think we've all learned, whether it's people that are in law firms in downtown Los Angeles that are working from home. It used to be if you work from home, you were just not very serious about your job. You wouldn't get a lot of respect, particularly for women, by the way. And we don't need to go there necessarily, but being at home has changed. Being able to use the technology has changed. Being able to get mental health services, have therapy on a screen where you are in the comfort of your own home and you can actually be one-on-one with another person, having an intimate conversation, not just a webinar, not just somebody just feeding you information. You actually, you can develop relationship through this technology. You can hear the voices. You can feel the energy, the integrity of who you are speaking with. We've learned a lot of lessons, right? About those, trolls getting into Zoom calls for the high school kids and, all over the place, We've learned how to protect ourselves. I think discernment wherever you go is really important. How you use the technology. I think the technology, though, is whatever we make of it. It's based on the user. And oftentimes, I don't know if you've seen me out there, some of my posts, it's like, if bad people are using it for their own, like, evil purposes, why can't we be really loud and help remind people that it's up to them? I see people fleeing, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, because, the dynamics change. Who owns it? Who's making the rules? I think we all have the opportunity to make the rules ourselves. Yes, we are, at the mercy of the technology, but we can use it the best way we can. I'm
And
not mad when things, change. It's
mm,
okay. You adjust. I think that's true of any part of our lives. The ability to be flexible and be able to modify how you engage and interact with other human beings. But I
I
don't
think,
think people should be
yeah,
afraid of it.
I think it's a great point, Maria, because you've made the point and the connection early on that you use these as we're talking about using these as tools to reach communities, to reach out, and you are sort of bridging that gap between sort of the human side of of life and
Hmm.
what's important, and whether it's self-care or therapy or meditation or whatever it is,
Yes.
or cold baths with or walking on fire with Tony Robbins, whatever that is in your
Yeah.
world.
They talk about
um
extremes of
r-
ranges, right? The ice
right.
bath and the fire
Yeah,
walking.
but you're also blending that in with using the technology to help bring all that together, and I think
Yeah.
that's a really good point. And the question I want to ask you, Maria, because I want to ask you a little bit about your own learning style. Obviously, you've had a great career. You've lots of experience that you can dive into and think back on, whether it's from the legal area, or I love the theater and the Broadway and the VIPs, and I mean, what a great experience. But
Hold on for just a second, Simon. I
yeah,
don't mean to interrupt you,
go
but
ahead.
I sense a big question coming that's going to change the direction of this conversation. And I just want to slip one more thing in there that
Yeah,
I've learned during my course. I've started helping politicians with their social media. And it's interesting because over the course of the last few years, like I said, I haven't been focusing on my own podcast as much, but voiceover, creating reels, creating TikTok, people are noticing what I'm doing for my own content, and they're approaching me and asking me to help them with theirs.
right.
And I just helped a friend win an election in Thousand Oaks. Um, the election was recently, and another person has reached out for me, to me, to help amplify his message. in politics. And I'm not very much of a political creature, but making other people look good, I'm kind of good at doing that. So, and
Yeah.
giving them confidence. I think with all this technology, you know, whether it's a real estate agent friend that's nervous about going live on Instagram, I'm like, no, just walk through the house, show people what you're selling. And it's so scary for a lot of people. So, anyway, I just
Well,
wanted
it
to add that
no,
for
I
some
think
reason,
yeah.
politics is getting into it a little bit.
No, but I think that's great, and I think we were talking earlier as well about you mentioned AI, and I don't want to go down an AI rabbit hole because we could talk for days on end about AI. But
Yeah.
um, I think a lot of people still we forget if particularly if you're into technology or you're using the latest tools, you forget that there's quite a large proportion of people that aren't or and maybe aren't as confident or aren't as
Right.
au fait with the next great thing or the next tool or the next platform that
Yeah.
need a little bit of help or a little bit of assistance. And that sort of using the term Web 2.0 world, that the social media sort of platforms that we know today,
Mhm.
we seem to be going through this Web 3 stage now, and we talk about Web 3.0, we talk about blockchain, and we talk a lot lately, particularly at the time of recording this, about AI. And again, I'm
Mhm.
not going to go down the rabbit hole here, but it does feel like we're in for a step change again. And there is an element of learning required here because it seems to me, this is just my perception, but there's an awful lot coming pretty quickly, which I think may take people by surprise, because it's really improving fast.
It is. It is. And I think part of that too is, I mean, even in the most basic sense of having filters, right? Some people don't go live at all unless they have their filter on, right? And I laugh because sometimes I'll do filters on Instagram or what have you. And then I laugh and I'm like, what about the people who catch me in the market with no makeup on? They're going to be scared. And I think with AI and with the direction that it's going, for me personally, podcasting, my voice is out there. I have had my voice used in ways that I did not authorize. They have taken my voice and used it on radio shows and such. And there's always this idea of some people said, well, you should be flattered that they used your voice. And other people are like, hell no. Why are they making money off your voice? And they didn't ask you, they're not sharing, all that kind of stuff. AI is a little bit dangerous because I think, you can copy people. Of course, that's the big fear. But I also see it as a great gift that can be, again, it's a gift. I think this technology, the ways we use it, if it's used
Yeah.
with integrity and the appropriate intention, I think our kids definitely, like you said, are going to start learning things faster, much faster. I mean, my kids don't know what a VHS tape is or a cassette, things change and it picks up speed, I think, just in the human evolution. Technology is just changing so quickly. I think that the beautiful thing is the ability to have conversations like this across the world. We don't know who's going to hear this. And we don't know where they are. We don't know what color they are. We don't know what they do for a living. And it doesn't matter. Our voices and our energy are here. And you're doing a great job with with your show, creating these snippets of perspective. And that's so important. That's so important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the audio side of things, particularly audio when it comes to AI, there's huge disruption, I think, coming down the track. And we're at the tip of the iceberg, literally, as the saying goes. So,
Well, I remember
you know,
years ago, I would not use ATM machines because I was adamant. I want to save the job of the person in the bank at the counter. I want someone to stamp my book. and, and it's just, it's the way it is. We don't even have to go to the ATM at all anymore. We can just take a picture of that check and deposit it immediately. Things change, and we need to be flexible, and we need to be compassionate. If we ourselves are feeling overwhelmed by the technology, by the way, and I do have a meditation on Insight Timer about this gratitude for social media and that ability to let go of that anxiety. Who's going to listen to my show? Who's going to see my post? How many likes do I have? Blah, 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 blah. It's just, it escalates. And when you can relax and step back, think, my voice is going to get to the right person at the right time. Maybe what I said will be repeated by someone in a different way and make an impact. It doesn't have to be my voice either. So maybe AI can help a little there too. I don't know, but
Yeah, I love that.
who knows?
And it's funny, I was talking to a gentleman called Simon Alexander Ong recently, and he is, I suppose, a life coach. He's award winning, but he's also an author. He's actually from the finance industry, studied at the London School of Economics, was in the finance world for about 10 years. And he wrote a book recently called Energize, which was published by Penguin Random House. And one of the topics that I was talking to Simon about was he uses the phrase a lot that you have to slow down to speed
Mhm,
up.
mhm.
And I think that's so true, particularly as the technology changes so rapidly. Sometimes you just need to take a pause, think about what you're doing, maybe learn a little bit. And by slowing down and just reflecting and understanding where you're at, it does
Yes.
help you to move forward maybe a little bit faster in the long run.
I did listen to that interview, and part of what you guys were talking about reminded me of the idea. You guys were talking, I think, about it's better to have 500 true fans, right, than millions. The same thing is true for where I'm at right now. I've tended to go really broad. And yes, it's that trust that my voice is going to get to the right place. But finding that balance, I worked with one of my mentors recently, and she was saying, what about the people who are asking you for more in person meditations? So sometimes when you go too big, you can forget about the smaller group that really needs your attention and is asking for more. Because when you're about more, 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 you actually do less, less, less for those few. So you have to decide and find your balance.
That's great, and thank you for listening to that episode. I think for anybody who
Yeah.
hasn't caught that, it's definitely worth listening to. I think Simon shares some Simon Alexander Ong, I should say, shares some real gems in that discussion.
Yeah.
But look, I wanted to ask you another question, and I do want to change gear at this juncture because I
Yeah.
want to ask you a couple of other things, and I don't want to run out of time, Maria. Uh, y- we were talking as well in my previous episodes about books that people like to read. And
Hmm.
it's kind of morphed into a question more about learning styles. And do people like social audio? Do they just prefer podcasts? Do they listen to audio books? Or do they pick up a book and read it? Or do they just like talking to people? So
Right.
when it comes to reading or learning, is there any particular author, genre, type of book, or how do you onboard information in your world?
I mean, I could tell you I have tons of books here, whether it is, Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, or whether it's a book about energy, or whether it's Marianne Williamson. But the books that have affected me most profoundly, I think, in the last couple of years have been on audio because I've traveled a little bit in the last couple of years. So audio has been a little easier for me. I am very much of an audio file. Audio is so important to me. I have a hard time listening to an audio if the voice itself doesn't resonate with me. And it's a shame because there are a lot of books out there on Audible and such. But if the right person isn't reading it, sometimes I won't be able to continue. But two books that have really struck me are Shonda Rhimes with her book, The Year of Yes. She read that book herself, and it was really, really great. I also, Matthew McConaughey, Green Lights. He read that himself too into Audible. I love both of those books because they're about moving forward. They're about opening up and trusting the path, just like what I'm saying here. The trust, I don't know where my voice is going. Chandra, she didn't know she was going to be sitting next to Michelle Obama at some point in her life. You know, it's just Matthew McConaughey. He didn't know he was going to be such a big star. You don't know where life is going to lead you. So I kind of enjoy personal stories like that, biographies. Um, I tend to not watch video that much. I know there's a big, debate about whether podcasting is audio only or video. I tend to be distracted by the video. I would prefer the audio. I prefer the short form content. I love a good conversation that I can listen to. The problem for me is that I will hear someone really inspiring and it will cause me to act, and I will go make something myself. I will be like, oh, wow, what a great idea. And I'll go and do it, or I'll record a meditation based on that feeling, that inspiration that I got from that. So I found my comfort, my learning, I'm really sparked by people, and I love to act on that. And that sometimes can be a problem because that can affect my consistency, right? So sometimes there are podcasters out there, and you know who you are. I've told you this. I can't listen to your show because it gets me all like riled up. I want to respond. That, by the way, Simon, is one of the great things about Twitter Spaces. As you know, oftentimes I'll be in the audience in a Twitter space, but sometimes having the opportunity to be on mic and reflect back to someone what they're talking about and expand on their ideas is such a gift. It's so amazing. I just love it. I think that in social media in general, there's a lot of this idea about people stealing ideas, right? People, oh, I had that idea. Oh, that was in my TikTok video, and then someone else made that. You know what? Marianne Williamson, that's how she got started. You take the learning and you explain it in your own way. And that's what any good teacher wants you to do. They want you. Tony Robbins wants people to go out there and say, I learned this from Tony Robbins. 1, 2, 3, these 3 fantastic things. And they might like me and they might understand what I'm saying because I'm the one explaining it in a little bit different way, but they're going to go to Tony too for more of what he's talking about. So it's just, I think information, I think knowledge is meant to be shared. I think creativity is sparked by interaction with each other. Yeah.
Well, that's good. And you've made me think about at the time of recording this, it's about to be published, which is Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin. She writes under the name Sam Blake, and she's the #1 best-selling crime writer in Ireland. And
Mm.
she has a book out at the moment, which went straight to #1 in January. It was only knocked off the #1 spot by the book Spare, the Prince Harry story, I should say.
Oh,
But her new book, The Mystery of Four. But the thing I was talking to Vanessa about when we were talking about audio, and your point reminded me of it. She was talking about the value of voice actors. And
mm-hmm.
even though she's published 9 books and she's a best-selling author, she's very well known in her field, an exceptional talent. But she does have professional voice actors voice her books. And I know some authors read their own books, but she loves the way that the actor can bring the book to life. And we also talk a little bit about the illustrators and people that, whether it's designing the cover or a children's book, for example. She's releasing another one later this year. or a young adult, I should say. The illustrations in a book, for example, help to tell that wider story. But it's amazing how, from somebody who lives in the world of writing on a daily basis, writing 9 very successful books, the number one best-selling crime writer here, and yet speaking about the importance of the voice and the audio. And you kind of
Yeah.
reminded me of that conversation, because you're saying, if the voice isn't right, I can't really listen to it. It doesn't really
Yes.
work for me.
And I think for anybody who's a creator, we're all creators, no matter what it is, we know where our limitations are as well. And we know when to ask for help. That is the most beautiful thing. You know, Christy Mickelson, she's a romance author, right? And I met her on Twitter. She's fantastic. I've read a little bit of her romance novels into Clubhouse, actually. And the way I read some of the sex scenes in it, she's gonna, I'm probably gonna do a book for her soon, one of her books onto Audible. But it's so interesting because if it's not the right voice, it doesn't work. It just, and I think it's great. It's really important for the writers themselves to
So you
realize
almost did a
that.
live audition via Clubhouse. Is that what you're telling me, Maria? Now you've got the
Yes.
voice acting gig. Is that what you're saying, really?
Yeah, and actually Graciela Moore is going to read one of her books as well, because
Fantastic.
she's been doing some stuff on wisdom like that. So it's fun. Yes, yes. But I am available to collaborate on voiceover work, especially I think for podcasters. I love like the reels, the 30-second clips. And the best way for a podcast to get attention is to get it heard a little bit out there. And obviously in podcasting, it's the hosts and their voice and such. But it kind of has a lot of power when it's someone else, doing the intro or doing a marketing clip for you and such. So
Very
that's
good.
kind of fun.
Very good. Well, look, thanks for sharing that answer with us. And the other question I want to ask you is, throughout your career and journey to date, whether it was on the traveling that you've done over the last number of years, or whether it's back to when you were a young child,
Mm.
there must be people along the way that have inspired you, that you admire, that you've looked up to, maybe. When I ask you that type of question, what springs to mind?
Wow. You know, I knew you were going to ask me that question. And I had some people in my mind, but who jumped into my head right now is my mom. My mom is kind of bossy and she talks a lot, but she reminds me of me. But over the years, our relationship has changed as she has seen me evolve into this more meditation realm. She has affected me in such a great way because she will come to my workshops, or I've interviewed her on my podcast about her own spiritual journey. She's very much about the 12-step program, which has a lot to do with spirituality, is all spirituality in different forms. Vocabulary is amazing. But I remember one time her coming out of one of my workshops and she was just crying. And she said, "I can't believe you're my daughter." It's just, it took her somewhere that I just feel like it's such a gift. So she has inspired me. And you never know, like I said at the beginning here, you don't know who you're going to affect. And as big, as wide as I could go with listeners and beautiful people, giving me feedback and encouraging me, my mom, wow, that was really special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that, Maria.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
What about advice? Now, that could be advice that your mom has given you time and time
Mhm.
again, or it could be advice that you've picked up along the way that you still keep, close to your heart, that you think is really helpful to you. Sometimes people say, well, it's that piece of advice where I wish I'd have learned it earlier. I wish somebody had said that to me years ago. Or if not, is there any advice that you find yourself often sharing with people that you think is important to share today?
I think the best advice that I've received is, after you get the same advice many times, to finally pay attention to it. I think using your voice, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I mean, all of us, I think, have this lack of maturity sometimes. When our mom tells us to do something, we immediately say, no, no way. My mom, I remember years and years ago telling me she thought I should go be an attorney. That was her thing. She liked the way explained things. She liked the way I spoke, but I don't like conflict. So that wasn't my thing. I didn't go in that direction. But then years later, I became a paralegal. And then now I find myself using my voice in very different ways. I think that over our lifetime, right, when you're giving your kids advice on what to do for a job, right now, we don't know what kinds of jobs are going to be here in 20 years. It's going to be completely different. So it's hard to tell our kids be a doctor or a lawyer. Maybe they're going to be an app developer. Like who knew that was a job? And it certainly is. So I think it's important to listen to and pay attention if you hear the same messages come through many times through your life. My mom basically was telling me to use my voice. She's like, communicate. And I think later in life, I've heard it from many different people. One of my favorite teachers, she was like, when I guide in meditation, she's like, your voice is like an angel. It's coming from somewhere else. And that's how I feel. And when I'm talking about technology, when I'm talking about some of this stuff, some of it is intuitive, like which buttons to push. Sometimes it's hard to explain to someone, right? By the way, I think in one of your interviews, you were talking about the value of creating content. It was something, it reminded me of this idea of, I heard a woman in a restaurant just a few days ago complaining. She had hired a social media person and she was saying, they billed me for 15 minutes to post that thing. I was overhearing her. She was like on and on. It takes 5 minutes. You just push post. She's going on. And I'm thinking that woman has no idea how much experience that person has. It's 30 years worth or 10 years, whatever the case may be, of how to create that reel or whatever it may be. And it's some things might look easy on the surface. And people just go, what? I'm just gonna yeah, just make a story. And they hire someone to do it. And it's interesting because I think we all bring our history with us.
Yeah,
And
it may have been a conversation I had not too long ago with Heather Monahan. She's a top 50
yes,
global keynote speaker, and we were talking about um, the social media that she puts out and the content that she puts out. And she gave me a little bit of insight into, starting as a single contributor to creating content and then moving to working with a team of people and bringing people in. And some of them didn't work out and some of them did work out. And now
yes,
she's at a place now, I think she was mentioning 5 maybe years later, where it's all working, it's all kicking in. And we were talking about maybe that term leveling up, or, it was kind of really starting to kick in, that flywheel effect. But she did make a point that the amount of hard work that goes into it behind the scenes is often unseen. And the other
yes.
person who spoke to that, actually, now you've reminded me, was when the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Simon Alexander Ong. He
Uh-huh.
he made a point of stopping me at one point in our conversation, saying, I just want to remind people though, it's great when you hear about, I've worked for, or I've done work with the Guardian newspaper group or Virgin or Barclays Bank, or, I'm speaking at XYZ conference and I've got this huge book deal with Penguin Random House and I'm speaking at every big conference that you go to. I seem to be there. He said, well, what people don't see is a 10-year transition, a 10-year journey to get there. He said, and that's really
Yeah.
important that people realize that, because you can get very frustrated very quickly when you just want that instant success. but people are working pretty hard behind the scenes and having to try different things, particularly when it comes to content creation. And then the
Mm.
tools and the rules are changing too. So
Yes.
it's an ongoing process, I think, Maria.
And you never know where you're going to end up. Right now I'm working with a company, a fintech company in Chile, Santiago, Chile, and they have me coming in on video to speak with their employees to get practice speaking about things other than fintech. And English is their second language. And their goal is to increase their productivity and get into the US market. They're starting to come in, but everything about their communication changes when they're more comfortable and confident. And so they're realizing that. So who knew? I had no idea I would be doing that. It's
Well,
just,
that's
it's
wonderful. And
crazy.
it sort of leads me
Yeah.
nicely onto my next question, because I wanted to ask you, as you plan ahead for the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. I'm not sure how far ahead you sort of work your plan, but what are you hoping to achieve over the next 6 to 12 months? What are you hoping to accomplish, or how do you go about that sort of forward thinking, forward planning approach?
Right now, as we start this new year, I'm getting more focused, like I alluded to my immediate group of people that is in my vicinity right now. I am still doing stuff. I'm doing meditation sessions. I'm starting to use Facebook more than Zoom because the kind of sessions that I do, it doesn't really require feedback from the audience anyway. And I have a group on Facebook that's private. So I feel pretty safe there, and people have been joining, and they're from all over the world. So it makes it easy. And when I do a live, of course, into Facebook, it's recorded. So if they miss it, they can catch it later, right? I want to, as much as everybody is trying to multi-stream, live stream to multiple platforms, everything, it tends to dilute my energy. So while I am kind of a genius at multi-streaming, whether it's Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, Wisdom, blah, 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 but how many people do I really need to talk to at the very same time? So I'm trying to hone in on smaller segments to give them more quality of my energy. Same thing is true. The Insight Timer app, by the way, I have recorded meditations available there. It is a free meditation app. But again, I haven't been very consistent sharing meditations onto that platform. As my tech has improved, and as my relationship with people out here in the world, I met an amazing guy, by the way, on LinkedIn. His name is David Feldman. He is, he's a marketing guy, but he's a musician. He creates the most phenomenal music, 3 and 4 hour tracks of meditation music, no vocals at all. They're perfect for my meditation. My meditations are like 15 minutes, don't worry. But it's beautiful to use that, especially like on something like wisdom, where I'm not exactly sure how long my show is going to be because I don't know who's going to come in. And he's given me permission to use it, by the way, which is important for copyright reasons. I haven't quite figured out how to tell Twitter that I have rights to the music because they kind of ding stuff once in a while, and the rules keep changing. But my focus is to hone in a little more on that meditation type work, but at the same time make myself available for people like my people in Santiago, Chile, with this way of reaching my voice out there into the world, and the way I explain things, the way I share my energy, the way I can pick up a script or do voiceover work for somebody. I could go in that direction as well. So
Yeah, I like that, because too often you hear, "Oh, I'm growing this and I'm scaling that and I'm chasing down more and more listeners and more followers." And you're actually saying, "Well, actually, I really want to focus on this group here."
yeah,
And that's such a nice thing to hear sometimes, you know. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, thanks for sharing that, Maria.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I think that's important too, by the way, for podcasters, because in the podcasting group that I have on Facebook, it's called Podcast Support community. It has nearly 7,000 people in it, but people have gotten into the habit of just splashing their links everywhere with zero context and zero relationship with the people that they're splattering with their links. And so the idea in my community is that in order to post, you need to explain what you're doing there. You need to like have some context to your link. It's okay if you say, I was interviewing this adult porn star about this, and here's the link. I don't care what the content is. It's all okay with me. No judgment. But at the core of all of us, we want to get our content out there. And so you want to get to the right audience, not just anybody. And that's the thing too. Sometimes my show, people say, share your podcast with your friends and family. Sometimes they're not your audience. They get to hear you talk all the time. You want to get to other people that you don't know. So I kind of love it. I kind of like Facebook, I have to admit.
Well, you've got to go where you find your community, where your audience is, and it's obviously working. 7,000
Yeah,
people strong and growing. I mean, it's obviously working.
it is. And we said before we got on air here, sometimes what I've learned in that community is to get rid of the people that don't understand. Once you tell somebody a couple of times, no, you need to say what your show is about. And they're like, why? Like, if you don't think your show is worth it, then go away. Sometimes they'll send me messages. If you don't post my stuff, I'm going to leave the group. Yeah. Okay. It's like a big threat, but
A little bit
I
of
want
a little bit
people
of
in there that
community
get it.
care there, Maria. Yeah, a little bit of community cleanup. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with a
But
little
but you-
boot.
but you're right. You've got to find people that not everybody is your audience, right? Not everybody's
Right.
going to like your stuff, and that's okay too. You know.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
well, look, before we definitely run out of time, I want to ask you just two last things real quick. Number one is there any topic that we haven't touched on or anything else that you'd like to share with our international audience today? And secondly, if people want to find out more about what you do, whether it's on the meditation side, whether it's on the voiceover side, whether it's on the other areas of work that you're involved in, or to find out all about all your shows and your communities, where are you sending people to? Where's the best place for people to reach out and connect with you, Maria?
Probably Twitter. I've been most active on Twitter lately, and I have my link tree on my Twitter profile, of course. Now, on the link tree, there is a menu of stuff on there, probably too much stuff. Some podcasters use their link tree to put their episodes on there, but I have a link to my podcast, and then I have links to my various Facebook groups. I love Facebook if I stay in my own lane. So I do have a number of Facebook groups. I have meditation with Maria. I have podcast support community. I have vibrations of positivity on Clubhouse because, now a couple of years ago, I love Clubhouse. I go back and forth. I'm not very active on Clubhouse anymore, but I would meet people in rooms there on Clubhouse and I would forget and I wouldn't know how to find them and such. And I wanted to talk to them afterwards. And so I created this community on Facebook because the thing on Clubhouse, of course, is everybody wants to be in charge of their own club. Everybody in there has a club. Then who are the members? And it just seemed kind of competitive to me. I want all the clubs to feel comfortable mingling together. And it's okay to be in a variety of clubs. Know what mood you're in, know what you're looking for. It's okay. My parents had a Mexican restaurant, and I always learned if somebody comes to the door and says they want Chinese food, you don't convince them to eat your Mexican food. You tell them where the Chinese place is. And so that's how I operate with anything I do out here. It's not me you have to listen to, but if the way I'm speaking and sharing helps you get to where you need to go, that's great. It's okay. So Twitter, Linktree. That's probably the best place to go. Um, in Facebook groups, I think, and communities. The one thing I would say here is that I'm a writer, and I haven't been writing very much because I've gotten into podcasting more. A lot of people are talking about, getting their podcasts transcribed and creating blogs and such. Most of my content doesn't quite work that way because the spoken word and the feeling that's coming through my voice doesn't really translate that well to written form straight like that. I can't just give it to AI and say, blurt it out. I have to rework it if I'm going to create something. Like I have had articles published in Times Magazine, but I haven't done that in a long time. And so I guess one of my intentions for this year is to create more writing. I do have a website, Strong Body, Strong Soul, but it's not up to date right now. And I'm intending to clean it up a little more. And then that would be my go-to. It has my podcast on there, but only the most recent episode. It doesn't have all my episodes on my Strong Body, Strong Soul page. So
Well, that sounds
clean
like
up.
a good plan for this year, Maria.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
look, that brings us nicely to the end of this episode, Maria. I mean, it's been great to catch up with Maria Humphreys on this episode of the Global Discussion. Thanks to everybody who's been watching and listening to us around the world. And it's been great. So if you want to catch up with Maria, who's, a podcaster herself, a show host, a producer, meditation guide and workshop facilitator and writer, many other things.
Yeah. And I guess the shout out is, time is precious.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you guys for taking your time to listen to this particular conversation. If anything that I have said really resonates with you, please do get in touch because I am always looking for interesting guests.
Very good.
So it's about the personalities and it's about the conversation. A lot of my shows are solo cast, so I don't do that many interviews. But if you're interested, go ahead and reach out and we can talk about it.
Well, there you go. Thanks for sharing that, Maria. And look, subscribe, follow the podcast. And I hope to see you back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Maria. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you today.
Thank you so much, Simon. Bye-bye, everybody.